Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, all. Well, I thought being Father's Day, I ought to start with a father-dad-related story. So I heard an account of a father who was passing his son's bedroom when he noticed it was unusually tidy. Who else would notice that if their son's bedroom was unusually tidy? That's most of us, I think. Surprised at seeing this, he popped his head around the door to see that there was an envelope on the pillow with his name on it, with Dad written on it. With a degree of uncertainty, he picked up the envelope, opened it, and he read the following letter. Dear Dad, it is with great regret and sorrow that I'm writing to you. I had to elope with my new girlfriend because I wanted to avoid a scene with you and Mum. I'm sure that you will come to love Angie as much as I do when you get to know her. However, I knew you would not approve of her piercings, her tattoos, and the fact that she is significantly older than me. And oh, did I mention that she's also expecting our first baby? One of what we hope will be many. Angie has opened my eyes to the fact that marijuana doesn't really hurt anyone. We'll be growing it for ourselves and trading it with other people in the commune for all the cocaine and ecstasy we want. In the meantime, we'll pray that science will find a cure for AIDS so that Angie can get better. Don't worry, Dad, I'm 15 and I know how to take care of myself. Someday, I'm sure we'll be back to visit so you can get to know your many grandchildren. Love, Joshua. P.S. Dad, none of the above is true. I'm over at Jason's house. I just wanted to remind you that there are worse things in life than the school report that's on the kitchen table. Call when it's safe for me to come home. A great reminder for us all dads to keep things in perspective. And that's really where I want to introduce the next chapter of our Mission of God series. It's a section of our series where, with the help of the prophets, we get to see God's perspective on the life choices of his people, Israel. But first, a quick review so that you know the journey that we've been on so far. Just before our break between Ascension and Trinity Sunday, we spent a few weeks looking at the theme of God reigns. If you need a little visual reminder, you have the banner in front of you. And in that section of the mission of God, we were shown a blueprint for how God wanted his people to live in the promised land. A united people, a thankful people, an obedient people, and a loving people. So if God reigns represented a blueprint, then sadly God judges represents, pardon the pun, a blurprint. It represents the reality of how the people Israel were living out their lives. You see, as the story of God's people unfolds, this big Bible story, we see how they fail to live up to God's commands, how they fail to be loving and obedient, but how they've been distracted and misled and putting other things in God's place. So over the next month in God Judges, we'll hear about how God holds us to account for the important things in life. And we'll look closely at 4 aspects of our potential waywardness: idolatry, injustice, pride, and false leadership. Are you excited at that prospect? There is some good news in there, folks, just to reassure you. So, I'm going to touch briefly this morning on this passage in Jeremiah where he speaks about idols. Now, if you were here a few weeks ago, you may have heard me speak briefly about Paul in Athens, walking through the city surrounded by all these idols. Somebody at the end of one of the other services came up to me and said, "Aren't you pleased that we don't have idols anymore?" I think it was a well-meaning statement. However, In one sense, whilst we don't have little bug-eyed idols, I'm hoping that none of you have got little shelves at home with a little dedicated idol on them. Maybe you have. Maybe this is especially for you. The reality is we do have idols in our day and age. They may be subtle, but they are there, and they are no less captivating and no less significant. So I want to name some of those over the next few minutes. I guess what we're saying is, again, if you'll pardon the pun, that idols have a bit of an image problem. That actually we have a picture of what an idol should be, and actually we need to readjust that so that we can begin to see things from God's perspective and begin to see how idols can have a significant impact in our own lives. But before we do that, let's just have a quick look at Jeremiah's context. The first thing to say is that Jeremiah is speaking into a state of religious and political decline for the nation. Ring any bells? A state of religious and political decline. Things are not going well for Israel. And in this context, the people are beginning to look over the metaphorical fence at the nations around them and looking at their customs and cultures and looking to assimilate themselves with those around them, most notably in the practice of creating idols. Jeremiah describes how they chop down trees, carve images, adorning them with gold and silver. Now that might seem relatively innocent, a little bit of kind of adult handicraft perhaps, but Jeremiah sees it as significantly more than that. And in particular, he identifies two problems with this practice. And the first is a very simple one. Their idols will not deliver on what they promise. You would get your money back if you bought one of these idols, invested in one of these idols, only to find that they didn't do what you hoped they would do. Listen, this wonderful phrase, like a scarecrow in a melon patch. Don't you like that? Like a scarecrow in a melon patch. Their idols cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot walk. They are a fraud, he says. They have no breath in them. They are worthless. The objects of mockery. When their judgment comes, they will perish. Idols have no power other than the power that is invested in them by those who worship them, by those who carry them physically around. And Jeremiah says, these may be the focus of much hope, but they don't deliver. They don't deliver. The second problem is that they become a focus for the people's hopes, and in doing so, they divert people's hopes from the true God. The great commandments that the people were given, you shall have no gods before me. That is why Jeremiah describes the objects as idols, not because that defines what they look like, because it defines what they do. They distract. They are those things that are created that seek to replace the Creator as the object of the people's worship. So let me try and bring things up to date for us. How do we spot a modern idol? Well, Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones had this to say. He said, an idol is anything in my life that occupies a place that should be occupied by God alone. An idol is anything in your life, anything in my life, that takes the place that God should have alone. Simply put, an idol is whatever or whoever you and I give central value to in our lives. They are those things that we feel we can give us a sense of purpose and comfort and acceptance. In an interview at the height of his international career, Ewan Murray, Scotland's most capped tight head prop, made this observation about how he had made his career his idol. This is what he said. All the shiny bubbles, the money, the possessions, the fame, the great elusive relationship, all bubbles that appear perfectly spherical, all the colours of the rainbow, they're bright and shiny and light as a feather. And you chase them because it's good fun. But the minute you get to them, they burst and they're empty. As Jeremiah has said, idols have no substance to them. They cannot deliver. They are bubbles, baubles that attract us, but have no substance to them. Ewan Murray goes on, the attraction of all the glamour and glitz that society puts up on a pedestal and says is the be-all and end-all, all the tinsel, the success. There are many ways of measuring success. It could be in popularity, being the funniest guy, or the guy with the best scores. It could be the money. It could be getting the best-looking girl, lifting the most in the gym, having the best clothes. It could be being the best rugby player in the world. In this article that Murray gave, he exposes some of the things that can become idols for us in our age. Pursuing wealth, pursuing our comforts, pursuing fame and popularity and success and achievement. All of these things, if we're not careful, can become idols for us. But there is an important question, isn't there? Are these things intrinsically evil? Are they not good, some of these things? Are they not all potentially good? Is it wrong to chase them? This is again what Murray says. He says it's not wrong to be funny or have a great-looking wife, or not wrong to have money and to want to be the best player in the world. But if that is your idol, then it is wrong. If that becomes your idol, if that becomes my idol, then it tips from being a good thing into being something that we've made into a God thing. You see, as we've seen in this series, we began with God creates. And God creates a world for us to live in. And what does he call that world? He says it's good. God gives us a good world, and he gives us dominion over it to enjoy it. And he says it's good. God has given us good things. And what we have done is we've turned good things into potentially God things. We've elevated the creation above the creator. And when we do that, those things cease to be the blessing that God intended them to be to us. And in many ways, they can become a curse. They can be the things that control us, that manipulate us into doing their will. So we've named some of the idols, but how do we spot what they might be in our lives? Ooh, ouch. Well, I guess the reality is that we all acknowledge it's a lot easier to spot the idols in other people, isn't it? Yeah? We get our papers and we look at the news and we see how bankers are transfixed by the idol of money, how celebrities are lured by the idol of fame, and how politicians are consumed with the idol of power. It's very easy to see the needle in someone else's eye. But the reality, friends, is that idolatry can be just as much an issue for us lesser mortals. Let me perhaps ask you what might be called an X-ray question. What, if you were to lose it, would seriously cause you to question whether you could go on living? Think about that for a moment. What, if you were to lose it, would seriously cause you to question whether you could go on living? In essence, this is the question that Jesus is exploring with the rich man. If you remember that story in the Gospel of Mark, the rich man comes to him and says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says to him, "Go and sell everything, give it to the poor." And he goes away sad, doesn't he? He goes away sad because he goes right to the heart of where we've made a good thing into a God thing. And the rich man had made a good thing into a God thing. You see, money used well is a great blessing, a tremendous blessing. Some of you will be given the gift of creating wealth. And with that comes great responsibility in terms of how you use that wealth to be a blessing to the world and to others. But in writing to Timothy, Paul says that money, the love of money in particular, is a root of evil. The love of something, putting it above God, is the problem. When we put creation above the Creator, it becomes an idol in our lives. We might reframe that X-ray question a slightly different way. As we see with Israel, we often turn to idols when we come under pressure. So let me ask you this. What do you and I use to comfort ourselves when things get difficult? What do we turn to when things get tough? If you're feeling blue, what is it that gives you a lift? Maybe exercising your buying power is the thing that gives you that little adrenaline rush. Getting that package through from Amazon and, oh, it's bright and shiny, but hey, it's a bauble and it's not really meeting that need in our lives. Maybe it's food that gives you a lift. Maybe food is something that we're in danger of tipping from being a good thing that God gives into a bad thing. Nothing intrinsically evil about a blueberry muffin. Well, maybe. Maybe checking your bank account in investments regularly, too regularly. Is it something that you need to see in order to give you that sense of comfort, that sense of security? If I'm making you feel uncomfortable, then imagine how I've been feeling this week preparing this. Because these things affect us all. These bug-eyed monsters that are on people's shelves several thousand years ago are real things that can manipulate and control our lives. And before we realize it, we come to a point where we are actually reliant upon these things so much. They give us a sense of well-being. And God is the only one who wants to take that place. How do we resolve these issues? Well, Jeremiah gives us the answer. He says it's a question of perspective and priority. Perspective because Jeremiah wants to remind us of what our big Bible story series has sought to remind us all the way through, that we have a God who created the world, who loves us and has made us in his image. He says this, God made the earth by his power. He founded the world by his wisdom. He stretched out the heavens by his understanding. He is the maker of all things, including Israel, the people of his inheritance. The Lord Almighty is his name. Just as we started with this series, we go back to the God who created the world, the one who created the world and called it good, the one who gave us dominion over his creation and called us to care for it and not to cultivate it into something that we then would worship. So perspective, having God's eye view on the world that he's created and on ourselves, not turning a good thing into a God thing. But secondly, whether these things are a blessing or a curse for us depends on our priorities. Rebecca Pippert said this, the person who seeks power is controlled by power. The person who seeks acceptance is controlled by acceptance. We do not control ourselves. We are controlled by the Lord of our lives. Friends, may I ask you a question? It's a very serious question. Who is the Lord of your life? Who is the Lord of my life? In his Lent book, Dethroning Mammon, which many of us were reading this Lent, Archbishop Justin Welby speaks powerfully about how the world is made an idol of wealth and market forces. His call to us is to identify those things that can be idols in our lives. I've not given you a conclusive list. We need to pray for wisdom and discernment from the Holy Spirit to know what are those things that are in danger of taking God's place in our lives. But whatever they are, the Archbishop encourages us to dethrone them and to, in their place, put Jesus in his rightful place at the centre of our lives. Is he the Lord of your life? Is he the Lord of my life? A few years ago, in my last parish, we completed a 14-day pilgrimage from Winchester through to Canterbury. It was an amazing journey. And it culminated with a very special service of communion, which was held in front of Augustine's seat in Canterbury Cathedral. Now, being relatively ignorant about these things, I didn't know much about Augustine's seat, but it is the ceremonial throne of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And let me tell you, it is huge. It is massive. It's more like a sofa than a seat. And I always wondered why it was so big until I read that book of Archbishop Justin's. And he explained that as a mark of honour, kings would invite people to sit with them on their throne. Kings would invite them to come and sit on their throne as a sign of honour. Friends, our series this month are looking at some of the things for which we rightly should expect judgment. God judges the waywardness of our hearts. That is the reality of what we're looking at. But you know, there is wonderful, wonderful news. Because that place of judgment, that throne of judgment, when we trust in what Jesus has done for us, actually becomes a mercy seat. It's the place where Jesus says, come and sit with me. Come and be with me. Let me be the Lord of your life. Let me guide you. Let me direct you. Let me be the one who comforts you. Let me be the one who meets your every need. Those deep, deep needs for love and acceptance. Those things that we otherwise would turn to idols for. And the key, friends, the key throughout this series, when we look at what God judges in our lives, is to remember what Jesus has done. He has borne our sin. He has taken our iniquity, and he has nailed it to a cross. And that judgment seat becomes a mercy seat. And he says, come and share that with me. Isn't that amazing? It is amazing. Now, we have an opportunity this morning to respond to that in song. We're going to sing together, Jesus Be the Centre. It's a song which we've maybe sung many, many times in the past, but I want to encourage us to use it as a song of responding to what you've heard God say to you this morning. Is God speaking to you? Is God challenging you as he was challenging me as I was preparing this to lay aside those things which we have invested too much of our time and energy in, to lay them down and allow Jesus to be the centre? Shall we stand and sing together?